Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We are going to go ahead and get the session started because we have a lot of good information for you today from our panelists. So thank you for attending Data-Informed Decision Making for Credentialing Leaders. I'm Lindsay Terwilliger, one of the CNG virtual committee members, and I'm just going to talk you through a couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to our panel for the information you've all come for. Mhm. So first, we always want to thank our sponsors. It's because of them that CNG can continue to provide these free events that are so valuable to our credentialing community. And as I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it's always good to say it one more time, please make sure you're muted during the panelist presentations to minimize background noise. The chat feature is enabled and we will be monitoring it, so you can submit your questions in there. You might receive a real-time answer, but if not, we will have Q&A at the end of the session. So we hope that we can get to everything that we need to. We also want to thank you for attending. Our next event is in Chicago, May 13th. We have some of our contact information on the slide. And without holding us up much more, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and Pam Weber will take it over to begin the panel presentation.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and get my slides going. Okay. Well, we are really excited to be here today and to talk with you about ways that data-informed decision-making really can make a difference in your organization and provide you with some incredible examples from both assessment-based certificate programs and certification programs. So without further ado, I'll introduce myself and then I'll turn it over to our power panelists to introduce themselves as well. So I'm Pam Weber. I'm the Senior Vice President for the National Apartment Association's Education Institute. And I have been a member of CNG for probably 20 years, which is awesome. So glad to be here and be a part of this. So Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Pam. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Allen. I'm the Director of Credentialing and Accreditation for the National Apartment Association Education Institute. I work with Pam, and I oversee 4 assessment-based certificate programs, one of which is accredited by ANAB, and I'll be sharing some data about those programs with you today.
Thanks, Amy. Cynthia?
Hi, everyone. Cynthia Allen, not related to Amy Allen, but happy to be here on this panel with Amy. I am president of Seacrest Consulting, have been involved with CNG previously and happy to be back on the virtual panel. And I'm going to be speaking about a project that we worked on with Pam and Amy and her team, and excited to share some information about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia. Heather?
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Collins, and I'm the Director of Continuing Professional Development at the Board of Certification for the Athletic Trainer, which is based out of Omaha. And I have a background in medical societies, and I've switched over recently to the board side. And my interest is at the intersection of those worlds. Today, I'm going to be sharing a case study from the BOC in a platform that we developed for continuing professional development.
Thanks, Heather. And Bill?
And Bill, last and least.
Not least.
No, it's great to be here. My name is Bill West, and I've been in the professional credentialing space for well over 30 years. It's very fun to see so many familiar names and faces on the call today. CNG actually has meant a lot to me, both personally and professionally, over those 30 years. And so it's fun to be with you and in front of you today. I am one of the partners at K-West Partners. It's a group of credentialing leaders from credentialing and learning leaders that came together to do something a little bit different in our space for helping associations and credentialing boards increase their value to the professions they serve through kind of a new approach to learning strategy, looking at the markets, creating new credentialing and learning tools. And I have the honor of working with Amy and Pam, and those will drive a lot of our comments today. So this is definitely a big part of where my personal career has pointed. Better use of data to inform kind of what we're really all after is outcomes for people in their careers and outcomes for businesses using our products to really make a difference in what they value for serving their professions. So now my least, Pam, because I went on too long. But
Thank you, Bill. We really appreciate you being a part of this panel. So as we said, we're excited to be with you today, and what we're going to how we're going to kind of structure the presentation for you. And I know we have about an hour and a half, so we'll make sure we leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. But we're going to go over a little bit about the importance of data-informed decisions and associations. Associations do have some unique characteristics that we want to make sure we cover, as well as the uses of data for credentialing programs, like different ways that it's being used. And you're actually going to get chock-a-block full of examples today, which is amazing. And then we'll move into the panelist examples. And then, like I said, we'll have the Q&A at the end. Our objectives today for you are around you understanding and being able to describe ways that credentialing organizations can leverage data for strategic and operational decision making. Also, ways that psychometric and program data can be used regularly to monitor program health, as well as we'll talk a little bit about strategic conversations with board and committees using program data and that relationship with your volunteers and staff. Okay. So to kind of kick us off and kind of go big picture a little bit as to what the importance of data-informed decisions are to us and associations, there's a couple of aspects that we wanted to share with you today, and you will see that we'll touch on these in our examples. But really, using data to inform decisions may seem pretty self-explanatory, right? There's so much complexity around what kind of data, how do you collect the data, who is using the data and for what purposes, and also the integrity of those decisions being made, right? Like sometimes we find data that doesn't support the direction we're headed. What do we do with that, right? It's important as association leaders and staff in our organizations that we're truthful to that kind of oath of how do we make sure that we're doing what's best for our organization, which also may be in conflict with what the volunteers want to do, right? So how do you manage that relationship? And so I think data-informed decisions is one way that we have a kind of a tool in our toolbox, if you will, as to how to manage resource allocation, as well as kind of decisions within the organization that are strategic and also programmatic. So having data-informed decisions helps to build credibility. It builds credibility for the organization. So when there are people that question maybe the direction it's going or what's happening with the program, that there's data to back it up. And also credibility for yourself as a staff member or credibility for the volunteer leaders that are making the decisions. It really helps to round out a bit more of why did you decide to do this? It gives you that foundation to build off of. We've also, in our organization and other organizations, use it for mission alignment. So how does data help support your decisions about resource allocation, focusing the organization on the things that it can do well and also be relevant to its membership or its constituents? And so that mission alignment is critical, and data helps you to do that. It also provides another perspective outside of the organization. So you'll have your own data about your program and your industry and things like that. But have you looked outside your industry? Have you looked at other certification or credentialing programs? How are they performing? That perspective is really invaluable to look outside and kind of benchmark yourself against as well. And then, as I mentioned, there's also impacts to the volunteer and staff relationship. So there's many times when we're in positions where we are moving change forward, changes to programs or strategic direction or just ways that we want to engage with our members. And so how do we make sure that part of that conversation is the data to back up those decisions, and that can impact our volunteer and staff relationship. It also is helpful for the boards and committees to have the data that they need to make decisions for the organization. Maybe they're setting policy. Well, they need that data to back up their decision and what it's for. And so I think there's a really good opportunity that data helps to bridge those conversations between volunteers and staff, because sometimes in association work, there's a member that says, hey, I've got an idea. And then you're like, now what do I do with it, right? How do we move that forward, or how do we decide not to move that forward based on what's happening in the industry, what resources are available in the organization? Data can help you do that. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of different categories of the types of data that credentialing and certification programs can use. So the big buckets really are around strategic, operational excellence, and program health. So for example, in strategic, it might be that you're looking at financial growth, or maybe you're trying to reach into a new market and there's growth there, or product development, or even partnership development. There's probably a ton of more examples, but just thinking through what are the strategic decisions that the board is making or that the staff and the board are making to help move the organization, and that is kind of that bucket. The operational excellence really gets at the day-to-day, what's happening in your operations, what's happening with the staff and the technology, how are they interacting, are they working smoothly? Are the people literally like, are the people paying for the product getting the right product, and are they paying the right price? Sometimes it's that basic, right? Just making sure that your operations are running smoothly. That helps build financial strength. It also builds integrity into your program. So if you're operating at a level of excellence, then you've got consistency in decision making about individuals that are earning or not earning the credential. You've got ways in which you're testing that and making sure that you're holding true to the standards that you are wanting to uphold in your operations. And then also, and you'll hear a little bit about from Heather today, there's some individual development that you can externally share that data and help improve maybe teaching or help improve individuals' continuing education work and things like that. There's also a bucket of program health, where we've used it especially too to help understand about how do we support candidates and students through the life cycle of a credential, as well as your exam health. What's going on with your exam? How are you maintaining it? How are you making sure that it's staying healthy? And your program relevancy. If you're starting to see trends in a certain way that consumers are using your product, they start to go down or they start to go up, you're looking at what that relevancy is of that program to the industry. And then, of course, defensibility. So having kind of actually all of these buckets in place helps with defensibility and being able to say, we've been running our program in a way that is meeting industry standards and also continuously improving and paying attention to the health and the consistency of our operations. With that, we're going to move right into our examples of the different organizations. So that way you can get a feel of how we've incorporated these kinds of principles into what we do. So I'll give you a little bit of an insight into NAEI. So the Education Institute for NAA actually is a separate 501c3 organization with a separate board of directors as well as committee structure from NAA, but we are absolutely integrated and work closely with NAA and are a subsidiary as such. EI has been through a bit of transition in the last few years. So kind of moving from our legacy programs to really trying to embrace what scalable growth means. So today we have assessment-based credential programs. There's 4 core programs, and actually Amy will be showing you some of the stats on those here in a minute. But those programs have been around for over 35 years. They've really shaped the roles that the individuals in the apartment industry have taken. So we've got credentials that focus on leasing, maintenance, property management, and also portfolio or asset management. And so those programs are really role-based. And so what's happened over the years is we've helped to shape those careers and advancement paths for individuals in the industry. We also had some uneven performance across the programs. We have some micro credentials that we're pausing right now because we're really not seeing the sales and we need to see what's going on with the relevancy. We also had a couple programs that were serving more niche markets that really weren't relevant and needed to be sunset, and we did that as well. So that's kind of where we started, is working with kind of that one solution. We have assessment-based certificate programs, and that's it. And where we're headed is more through the lens of a financially sustainable credential portfolio, which means that we may have different types of programs that we want to really invest in, and you'll hear more about that soon. We also are moving towards and have gotten much better at data-driven decisions to identify the growth potential, which is incredibly important for us to make sure that we're allocating resources appropriately and also prioritizing them. We have so many different stakeholders in our audience base that we literally could have 10 different audiences that we're trying to reach. Well, how do you reach 10 different audiences really well? You don't. Not without prioritization, focus, and being able to hone in on how do you make sure that you're giving them what they need, and they don't all need the same answer to the training or the credential question. We also are working towards, and some of the work that you'll hear about here in a minute, have led us to stronger volunteer leader confidence and buy-in. So as we're moving through change and we're really kind of rocking the boat in terms of this is how we've always done it, isn't this the way we should solve for our issues? It really takes some effort to make sure that you have the volunteer leader buy-in, but they also have the confidence in the process that you've put in place in order to get to those decisions, because they also have to stand behind that when volunteers or when other members ask them about that. Okay, so how do we do it? I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia, who's going to give you a little bit more about how we collected the data and how the recommendations came together, and kind of how we manage the change management aspect of this as well. Cynthia?
Great, thanks, Pam. So before I get started on the process, I just want to put a little bit of context to something and expand a little bit on something Pam said about kind of the volunteer buy-in. And the first thing I want to say is that Pam's team really put together a task force of individuals to help kind of guide this process as we were figuring out, well, what was needed and kind of where was this going to go. And it was really important to have that strong volunteer involvement. And in this case, as Pam referenced, the stakeholders are really diverse. And that might not be true for everyone on this call. Like, some people serve an audience that's very specific when it comes to discipline, and it might not be as varied. In this case, that was not true. There's everything from, the technicians to portfolio managers, and it was really everything in between. So it was beneficial because you can really have a lot of variety in the products that you're developing, but it was really challenging because it's those 10 audiences that Pam talked about, and who's the priority and where is the growth. So the first thing was really to make sure that that task force that was leading this project was really as diverse as the audience that it serves. They also needed to be knowledgeable of NAA as an organization and NAAEI as the institute that was developing and administering these programs. The kind of pro and con of that, and something that we see a lot, is that these individuals were knowledgeable, but they were also very engaged with the organization and the industry. They had kind of risen up through the ranks, and they were really bought into the mission. They were passionate about the products that were being offered. They were maybe instructors. They had maybe been involved in the development of those products and kind of the ongoing maintenance of those products. So we had to be really careful about balancing kind of their decision-making, maybe with a little bit of blinders on. They were already really engaged and they wanted to see that value continue, but we had to make sure that we balanced that with making decisions in kind of a vacuum of that conference room in a hotel of, we know you're engaged, we know you see value, we have to make sure not to put the perspective of value that we want to see versus what might actually be out there and what people might actually need versus what we want them to need. It's kind of like doing a job analysis almost of, we have our SMEs come in and they tell us what that content outline needs to be, and we don't stop there. We go out to that broader practitioner pool and we validate what that smaller group of subject matter experts has told us. So making sure that you go out and not just listen to what that small group says, regardless of the fact that they're leaders in our industry, was really important. So use that knowledge and that collected engagement and enthusiasm, but make sure you're going out to that broader stakeholder base to validate what you're hearing inside the room is really important. In this case, we were looking at a needs analysis process to really understand who the stakeholders were and where we needed to prioritize them. Like Pam said, they were a lot and they were varied. And on the spectrum of who those audiences were, knowing that we couldn't be everything to everybody, where was the biggest potential growth opportunity and where was the biggest need that was the first priority, second priority, and kind of if we phase this out, what would it look like potentially? We wanted to make sure that we understood not just how to prioritize the stakeholders, but was really trying to understand what their needs and wants were. So I think we throw around that analogy of the Field of Dreams movie a lot of if you build it, they will come. We wanted to make sure we're not just putting something out there because this is how we've always done it, but we were actually building products that were meeting the needs of those stakeholders and also the different segments of the stakeholder itself. So generationally, we're not just hitting what a generation needed 30 years ago, but what is the new workforce? What are they engaging with and what might they need from us? As the generation of workforce is really varied in what they need, we're paying attention to that as well. So what that ended up being was kind of a three-phase approach to the needs analysis, where we spent a lot of time on discovery up front, working with that task force and really taking advantage and leveraging their expertise, and then going out to the broader stakeholder groups and doing a series of surveys. I can't remember where we started on the number of surveys, but we ended up with 4, and I thought that was pretty good. I thought it was going to be a lot more than 4, but we ended up with 4 different surveys of audiences that included the current credential holders, so people that had participated, and we knew that they had done something, so trying to engage with those people that had already participated, non-credential holders. In this case, we went to affiliates of the organization. For them, that's a really important audience. Again, that might not be for everybody, but for this group, that's really important. So we needed to make sure we had their buy-in. They drive a lot of participation. And then we went to learning and development professionals within the industry, at companies within the industry. So what were they seeing in terms of needs? And really, we were looking to identify not just what people needed in terms of professional development, but also their preferences. How were they going to engage? Was it synchronous, asynchronous? Do we need to do a blend with some live instruction? Was it longer programs like EI was used to producing? Was it smaller chunkable pieces? Is it a skill-based model? We had some assumptions of what that was going to look like based on what we're seeing in the industry and what other research is showing us, but wanted to make sure we were validating that with that broader audience. And then what was the perception of the programs from these different audiences currently? And then where were some of the knowledge gaps? If programs were developed, what were they going to focus on? What is the knowledge that was needed by which stakeholder? And then the third phase of this process was taking the survey data and then doing some focus groups with these 4 different survey audiences. So a series of focus groups to dive into it. There's only so much we can ask in a survey question. So it's really about taking that data that we're seeing and diving into it with some discussion and kind of getting the human side of it with more discussion and diving into it a little bit more so we can pull out some meatier information that will hopefully help us understand the perspective just beyond what we're seeing in the survey results. The recommendations based on these results, a couple of things I just want to point out, and then I will move on because I know we have a lot to cover, is really, one, continuing to focus on prioritization. What was a do now, do next, do later, don't do it all? Where could we, if we had a matrix of prioritization, where did things start to fit and fall so we could help the task force really identify the priorities? Those recommendations focused in 2 big buckets of where was there potential growth opportunity with the current programs, and then where were new products that were focusing on what audience did they fit and what format and topics were they going to focus on. Before, Pam, I know you want to talk about change management from your perspective. The one thing I just want to say on that is for EI, you mentioned there was kind of, we've always done it this way with assessment-based certificate programs was really the model. So one part that our team really wanted to lend was the portfolio could look at not just that type of program. And Pam and her team were really open to that idea of we needed to educate on, it could be a micro-credential, it could just be education, it could be all these different options, and providing them with a scope of this is what those products in your portfolio could look like. This is what they might include in terms of, was it an assessment included in there? What is the scope of that product? And then what is the investment, both initially and long-term, for EI as an organization? So they could make some informed decisions and not just default to what they had always done. So they had some options of, okay, if it's this topic, that's really just a skills base. It's not a full program. We don't have to develop a full program for that. And that was part of the change management from our perspective of helping them understand this is what a portfolio could look like. And then Pam, I'll throw it back to you on some of the other change management topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cynthia. And so just to kind of round this conversation out, and then I'll move to like, what do we decide and where are we at now? So we really, and quite frankly, my mantra has been make ourselves available for those audiences, especially through any sort of change, or, kind of bigger picture, or especially strategy change. And so just to give you an example, we have monthly calls with our affiliate education staff. So we communicate that to them in those calls. We also have 3 in-person governance meeting days a year that are associated with our larger meetings. And we really do cram like all the boards and committees in like one day. And so I literally go to 10 different meetings in one day, and I present exactly what's going on with EI and how any changes that's coming down the pike impacts their stakeholder group, and make ourselves available, either myself or with our volunteer leaders, to be visible to those groups. And that's made a difference in our ability to move through change and kind of communicate and build that trust and alignment with us. So just to give you perspective of what our kind of our outcomes have been, we did decide to expand beyond our current credential program types. So we are looking at new program types, which is really exciting. We also got clear organizational focus in that, because as managing an organization where there are a lot of competing stakeholder groups and a lot of competing interests, you have to say no, right? You have to say, no, we don't have the resources to do that right now. Maybe we can do that in a couple of years, or maybe that isn't a right fit for us at all. This data has helped us to really hone in and say that, and use that to be able to budget and communicate to the board the importance of investing in what we've agreed to do. And then just a couple of points, and actually I'll show you this slide next. So this is how we've communicated externally our vision. And where we're headed and how we're getting there. And you can see some of the data from the work that Cynthia did with us on the training needs analysis is there. The upskilling part, like they really want skill advancement, career advancement, curiosity and desire and knowledge. That's their motivations. But here's their barriers, right? So the lack of time, the cost, the lack of relevance to the job. So we are using this to communicate. And if you look at the bottom half, our focus for the last year or so has been in the current programs around our content structure, our content management, our benefits of earning the credential and the data to support that, and strengthening our instructors for training and development for them. And then as we look to this year and the next few years, and I'll talk about that in a second, we're looking at new program launching around skills-based professional development and micro-credentials. So this is a visual that we've been using to help articulate that change. And so I gave you a little bit of this, but just to add to this, we've got our core program updates underway. Our next phase, which is where Bill and his team comes in, is that we're taking that foundation, that work that Cynthia did with us, and the decisions that were made by the board based on that, and really diving deeper into exactly what's the potential, right, in terms of target audiences and topics and the types of products we can deliver. And we're using a similar process with them. And then we're also going to get return on investment data specifically towards a strategy that the board will be able to invest and be a part of. So Bill, did you want to add anything to that? That's all happening now, and a lot of that work will be finished up by the time we get to the early fall. So
yeah, so there's a lot to say. It's an exciting project, and I love the approach Pam and Amy are taking. It's really it's a very data focused approach. That's the conversation today, but it's really multifaceted to really help an AAI identify and capitalize on opportunities for new and improved learning opportunities. So not just we know certification or we know ABCs, let's just apply those. But it's really starting with a survey and research data from the broader industry, right? To gain a broad understanding of needs, learning opportunities, available to rental housing professionals. So from there, developing a survey to gather feedback. And so we're just at the beginning of this survey process, and then we'll be moving into, sorry, Pam, I don't mean to get ahead of this. I think the important thing to say right off the bat really is kind of not starting with any assumptions. It's surveying, it's gathering data from the field, because it's changing, right? The apartment landscape, the professional landscape, the people involved by age, it's changing quite quickly, right? When you think of the apartment industry, right, it's a lot of different things, right? And so wanted to take a broader, multifaceted look to gather feedback from the field and then apply the right strategy, not go in with a certain bias of, okay, how do we just develop the right credential or something like that. So it's a wildly data informed look, and then we can pull from the whole toolkit of assessment, credentialing, learning techniques available to us now, which are changing quite a bit, and then applying what those will be. We don't know what those are yet. So, but we're relying on the data and the SMEs that we're working with.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, and I think I would say, because there are times that I sit back and say, oh my gosh, we've been working on this for years and we still don't have a new product out. I mean, that's just right. Like, that's the reality. But we've had some operational things, and I'll turn it over to Amy here in a second, where we've just had to really get to where we're operating at a more operational excellence level. And we needed to put time into that, right? And so in order for us to grow and really be able to invest in new things, we had to get some other foundational aspects right first. And so this process and that we worked with Cynthia on helped us to understand that, no, we've got some things with the core programs that we need to emphasize first, and then we can build on to that. So all very good. And thank you both, Cynthia and Bill, for that and being a part of this today. So I'll turn it over to Amy Allen. She'll talk to you about more about the operational and the day-to-day kinds of things that we've been doing to improve our data and decision-making.
Thanks, Pam. As Pam mentioned just now, the things that we needed to do to get to a place where we're really ready to use our data. One of the prime things she's referring to is 2 years ago, we built our own credentialing management system, a CMS. So before that, we had managed our credential process through Salesforce, which is the database that our overall organization uses for membership and all kinds of things. And we were managing credentials in that system. We built our own system. So now it's a database that's set apart from Salesforce, but they do have some integrations and sharing of data. But when we built that system, that enabled us to also build a way to collect data and reports that really helped us get into the weeds and the details of all of our programs. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, is what we're able to now use because we have a really highly performing system that enables all of our stakeholders, our education providers, our credential candidates, our credential holders, use all the same system. And so we have all of the data contained in one place that we can use to track all of that. And so you can see here on the slide, we use Power BI as a platform to take data from Salesforce and from Microsoft Dynamics, which is the platform that our CMS is built on. And then we pull reports from those two locations and help us track first, our data integrity. I'm going to talk a little later about the program health, but for data integrity, our goal here is to make sure that our systems are working correctly. All of the various processes we have of ordering materials and applications and people taking their exams and renewing credentials, there's a lot of processes going on, and we want to make sure on a regular basis that all systems are running smoothly, that nobody's getting dropped or things aren't happening correctly. And so we have reports that we run every month, probably 30 or 40 reports actually, that flag for us any kind of outliers, things that need correction or that aren't performing the way they're supposed to. And I just gave some examples here. If there's any issues with extension fees or renewal fees, people who are applying to renew their credentials, they submit CECs, so are those being processed correctly? Enrollment and candidacy issues, orders of course materials from our providers, And then exams would be, an integration with our exam provider. Are we receiving the scores correctly, and are they updating the applications correctly when people pass their exams? So we have a whole series of reports that we are able to use to track operational efficiency. We can flag problems much more quickly than we could previously if something's not running correctly. And that really helps us with our customer service, with our, minimizes disruptions, any kind of negative experiences. We're able to catch those much more quickly, which really helps with the program reputation and having happy customers. Next slide. So the other side of things, so that's the data integrity. That's making sure that operationally things are at a go. We also created a series of reports that help us track the health of our programs. Enrollment, exam, and renewal reports give us an overview of how each of our programs is operating, what the trends are, over the course of a year, the course of months, year over year, in all different ways we can track them. And what's really unique about our new reports is that previously we would run a report and it would be pretty much based on, say, a calendar year. How did we do in 2025? The issue with that is for our candidates, they don't necessarily adhere to a calendar year when they enroll in a program or take their exam or renew, or it's ongoing and it flows. And so we were not actually capturing data on the same people. If we just ran a report on 2025, it could be somebody who applied in 24 and passed in 25, things like that. So now our new reports are able to track cohorts over time. So that data is actually always changing. If I ran a report today versus 3 months from now, the numbers would shift, but that's because that cohort of people who enrolled in whatever time period I'm looking at, maybe some of them passed their exam right away. Somebody else had an extension and took another year to do it. But over time, that data builds up, and we get a fuller picture of the performance of those people. I'm just seeing some notes here that there's no audio. Are you all able to hear me okay?
You got a lot quieter on my end, Amy.
I didn't change anything, but
can everyone hear me okay at the right level?
I can hear you, Bill. If I speak,
okay, so you're
louder?
just somewhat quieter from
okay. I didn't touch anything, but I'll just try to raise my voice.
That's much better, Amy.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to show you some examples of the reports, but just wanted to give you an overview of them. Our enrollment report measures enrollment over time, the number of enrollments we have per program. Within those enrollments, the number of people who have attempted their exam, the number of people who earn a credential, and then what that rate is for earning a credential. Our exam report measures pass rates, but we have 4 different programs. We have different training types. So we have people who take our courses online versus in person. We have provisional candidates versus full candidates. And we have various types of education providers. We have community colleges and universities. We have our local affiliates, workforce development programs, corporate programs. So all different type of providers. And we're now able to track performance of students based on how they've taken a course or who they've taken a course with. And then our renewal report can track year over year, how are we doing with renewals? Are they improving? Are they declining? It really gives us some benchmarks and to track that data over time so that we can make decisions or spot things more quickly than we would have previously. So if we go to the next slide, Pam, I'm going to just show you each of the reports and what they look like. I know that it's probably pretty small, the data on there, but I'll just show you a few things. report, if you can see it lists out our different programs, and some of our programs offer a provisional opportunity to earn a credential, which means that you don't have the experience yet. You get to meet the experience requirement for the program. And then we have the full credential. So these enrollment reports break down how many applications we're getting for each type of enrollment, and then who's taking the exam. Are they even trying it? And that kind of data would help us to know, do we need to make some more efforts to encourage people to take the exam? Are they, what's our rate there? Are people taking the course and then stepping back and not actually finishing? So something like that is a really good indicator of where we need to step in and provide maybe a push to people who haven't taken their test. And then it also shows us what our rate of earned credentials is. And we can track that to see if we need to do some more work on figuring out why people aren't earning the credential. Is it that they're not passing the exam, or they're not taking the exam, the materials needing updating and things like that. Next slide. On the exam report, you'll see the redactions here. I took away the pass rates from this because this is not our psychometric reporting from our testing vendor. These are our internal reports. And so we don't share those publicly. So I just removed those from that, but that's where all the redactions that you see are the actual percentage rates. But you can see on our exam report that we split out on the top set of blue lines, the in-person versus Visto. Visto refers to our online course. So we're now able to see the different pass rates between our in-person and online students, which is great information for tracking the performance of instructors or seeing where there is success or not as much success with how people are learning. And then also by provider type. I listed out there all of the different providers that offer our courses, because these are assessment-based certificate programs. We offer the training and the exam. So it's very informative for us to know, based on each of our provider types, how do those students perform on their exams. So those are some great data points that we can use then to decide who may need some more resources or where we want to focus our opportunities next. Next slide. And then the renewal data report shows year-over-year comparisons of how our renewals are going. All three of our four core programs, and then we have one program that's been the training has been sunset, but we still allow people to renew. So there are four programs that we have that require renewal, and so here we can just track over time what those renewal rates look like. And this really helps us with understanding why people are renewing, why they're not renewing. Using this data previously, we saw that we needed to do a survey to find out, why are people not renewing? Why are we seeing some declines in those numbers? And we did a survey, and that helps us to formulate a marketing campaign around showing the value of a renewal and overcoming some of the barriers that people see to it. So this data fed into that decision. Next slide. And this is a picture of our credential dashboard. This is actually an 8 or 9 page report that we provide. Again, all of the reports you saw we provide to our board and our committees regularly throughout the year, so that they're able to track along with us and flag things or ask questions to help us improve our operations. But this report brings together our financial information and our enrollment and credential earned information so that we can give them a big picture. Here's how we're doing. Here are the goals we set for ourselves. And then because we provide this throughout the year, it's updated with how close are we to attaining our goals, and what we are looking at over time. And then behind this cover page, there'd be a page for each of our programs that would break down for example, our CAM program, and really splitting out those numbers so they can see very specifically who's applying, who's earning their credentials, what their pass rates are, and things like that. So I think we've gotten some great feedback from our stakeholders. They always, every time we meet, they have been asking us for more data, and providing these reports to them has really answered a lot of their questions. Certainly, the data sparks conversation and some good strategic thinking, but before we weren't even able to give them this information. And so it's really a great achievement for us to be able to do this for them. And so finally, just to summarize it, our goal really is in collecting all of this data to leverage it to make better decisions and make sure our programs are operating at their highest capacity. So I mentioned some of those things and what that looks like, how we're, when we saw on the exam report that our provisional candidates had lower pass rates. And so that led us to improving some of the resources for them. What do they need to help them? These are people without experience in their field. And so can we provide more study guides, some more tutorials, better training for them to help them? We wouldn't have been able to spot that without that data showing the separation of pass rates. And similarly with enrollment numbers, when we see a program decline, this year we're going to do a strategic review so we can figure out what is it about this program that has made it less attractive. How can we meet the needs of the industry, which is our goal overall? We really just want to be there as a provider of education to make sure that people who work in the industry have all of the skills and knowledge that they need. And so this is a constant effort for us to make sure our programs are meeting that need.
Thank you, Amy. That was great. Really appreciate the examples that you provided. Now we'll turn it over to Heather to talk about what's going on at the Board of Certification for the athletic trainer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, as we have a case study on how the BOC is using a low-stakes longitudinal model to support data-informed decisions in continuing professional development. And as many of you know, longitudinal assessment in healthcare was developed as an alternative assessment route, but there were so many benefits that emerged from that model and outcomes. We began to look at it as a way to solve several interesting problems and bring things together. Like many organizations, we were collecting or aware of meaningful data that existed in various places, but it was fragmented, underutilized, and not always accessible, right? So this led us to explore how we might better integrate the data streams and support our learners, our approved providers or continuing education leaders, and organizational decision making. And I wanted to acknowledge my colleague and supervisor, Shannon Fleming, and the leadership of the BOC and the staff who have been instrumental in this development. It's not just me. And as Cynthia mentioned earlier in this presentation, right, this work could not have been done without many, many athletic trainers volunteering on this project for several years. Their input was absolutely mission critical. So what I want to do is walk you through how this model creates continuous data and how that data is being applied for decisions. That's the screen I need. Thanks. Historically, our data looks something like this. Maybe it's familiar, maybe it's a little different from your specific discipline, but we had multiple data sources and they existed largely independently of one another, and each had limitations. For example, we knew from our CE participation data some of the courses that our members had completed, but we really didn't know whether those reported courses were aligned with their actual learning needs or gaps. And we knew that learners had perceived needs, objective needs, and wants and interests. Those aren't always the same things, right? You all know, related to their CE consumption and growth. But aside from periodic surveys or other touch points, we had no way to continuously monitor or support reflection on those needs. And frankly, I don't think learners had many opportunities or tools for objectively reflecting on a regular basis either. So similarly, we're looking at the provider data, and providers could give us data. We're their accreditor, but we lacked a consistent mechanism for sharing learner insights, emerging gaps, and program priorities to kind of get that loop going in a fast way. And unlike some other healthcare boards, we did not have a required high stakes assessment for recertification. And that created both a need and an opportunity to explore, again, as I said, the low stakes or no stakes longitudinal approach that could support both learning and insights. So while each of these data streams pictured here had value, they were not connected. And that was a problem. So I'll go ahead and next slide. We began to shift from disconnected data streams to more intentional and an integrated model, excuse me. This model is built on three elements. First is longitudinal engagement with regular learner interaction over the renewal period. And then we have alignment with best practice, which is down at the bottom, right? We wanted to make sure that we were giving them the best practice that was emerging from the science, the position statements, the evidence from the literature, so that those that are part of their continuing professional journey can stay up to date. And we wanted to add reflective adult learning, where learners themselves assess their own strengths and gaps over time and have skin in the game. Together, these move us from intermittent snapshots like surveys and focus groups, which are extremely important, but we're adding that piece of continuous flow of data tied to assessment, reflection, and learning. And importantly, this does not replace any existing data. It just connects and enriches it and allows us to better understand our learners, identify patterns, and link learning more directly to practice. Again, the goal is not more data, but merely more meaningful data. Okay, so I want to show you, this is, ta-da, the CPC platform that we developed internally. And we first implemented it as a pilot in the year 2024 and officially rolled it out this February after in 2025, reflecting on the data that we received and using it for our improvement purposes and communication with our partners. And it is an option for our athletic trainers alongside the traditional recertification route, so they can take either. This design centers on three core components. First, my goals, where they have a structured form and process to identify their priorities. They're driving the bus. Second, my challenge questions, where they take no stakes longitudinal assessments that generate continuous data for them to be reflective learners on in their knowledge, decision making, and confidence. And third, we have their My Learning Path, where they plan and engage with continuing education, their learning, aligned with both their goals and informed by their MCQs or My Challenge questions. And together, these create really an interconnected system, an interdependent system, where assessment generates insight, reflection helps interpret it, and learning provides application. Okay, so the last part is a reflection. At the end of the 2-year cycle, they complete a 5-question reflection that provides them an opportunity to just consider where they are, where they've been, and what tweaks and adjustments they need moving forward. It's very quick, but it's powerful, and of course, related to adult learning theory. Next we have a video. Is it possible, Pam, to go ahead and play this and we can watch how the user experiences it? It's not playing sound, but I'm just going to talk while it does. This is how you go into My Goals, and it's showing you the 3 pillars. But the first step is to go in and set goals. And you do that simply by starting with a SMART questionnaire that gives you some guides you through a thoughtful process to help you get started. It's a very brief form that they answer a few questions too about, where they are, where they're going. And they submit that, and then they go in and manage their goals here. And I'm sorry, you would have had a professional narrator and music in the background. Anyway, they go ahead and fill out a SMART goal, right? That's measurable and so forth. And then they go in and take a My Challenge question. You're going to see what those look like. They are broken into segments. They must engage each segment or quarter and stay up to date. We give them a grace quarter. Here's a sample question, and they're assessed on both correctness and confidence. You can see that they mark here very confident after they answer the question, or not confident, and go ahead and turn that in. And it's a little gamified. And then they're given rationales for the incorrect and correct answers. If they answer incorrectly, they get to see that. So it's really a formative assessment. It's assessment for learning. And it's timed. Also at the bottom, we provide references, scholarly references aligned with that topic, as well as, and they can favorite it, read it later. And they can also, we have an AI recommender that we built that presents with them with learning in their geographic area or digitally accessible learning that relates to that. So if I miss the question, I might need to take a class on it, or maybe it's something I'm really interested in. I might need to take a class on it, and I can favorite it and link it and put it on my learning path. So then I think, is it repeating a little bit? Oh, okay. Here you can see the dashboard again, where they can see when their deadlines are and how to stay on track for each segment. So this is longitudinal learning. Many of you have probably seen similar platforms and like this, but this is modified for us and our users. So thanks for playing that short video, Pam. I want to show you the next slide, which has the learning awareness dashboard. So those MCQs are then turned into actionable learner insight with the confidence and correctness responses that help pinpoint learning states that we call zones. The risk zone contains parts of our practice domain, that's domain 1 through 5 here, where the AT showed overconfidence and gaps. So they missed the answers and they were confident about that. That could be a risk or a blind spot. And people that have areas here would probably need to lean into those. The awareness and learning zones are where learners are aware of gaps or have unknown strengths. They're in a development area. This is based on Martin Broadwell's unconscious competence model that we adapted. And lastly, we have a mastery zone where learners are confident and correct. And so this is shifting measuring performance into really knowing where one stands and where you need to go and how you're developing in between. So the next thing so this is where the impact and learn really hits at the learner level. Continuous assessment helps learners to better understand their strengths and gaps. And during the pilot, we learned that 94% of the participants reported improved awareness of that. And paired with goal setting and the learning plan, this creates really more intentional, personalized approach to professional development. Learners are not just selecting continuing education to meet a requirement, they're choosing learning that's aligned with their needs and their priorities. And so we have a cute saying, we say that you're no longer counting CEs, just checking them off, they're making CEs count for them. And this represents a shift from passive participation to truly intentional professional development. So it's no longer just butts and seats. We're looking at how it's impacting the learners. All right, so we are also utilizing this data and including the approved providers or the educators of continuing education in this process. And the aggregate and only the aggregate learner data, we do not collect we are not reporting individually. This is a personal dashboard for them. So we're looking at the aggregate learner data, such as the most common goal topics, CE topics, the most common articles that were pinned, the MCQ patterns, etc., can be shared with approved providers to help them target the actual learner needs and interests. And this is a giant opportunity for approved providers to align their content and make it even more relevant. And a new data issue surfaced as we were building Pathfinder that we didn't know we were needing to prepare for. So that's one of the fun surprises of doing data driven work, is that sometimes you open up a Pandora's box. But it surfaced that course listings in the approved provider directory, or our phone book, if you will, of all of the approved provider courses for ATs weren't always clear or complete. They hadn't entered them correctly, which made courses hard to find and limited the AI recommender in Pathfinder from recommending and pushing those courses in relevant ways out to the learners who needed them, finding the needle in the haystack. And so this led to a targeted cleanup initiative with providers, and the BOC led that. Additionally, the Pathfinder AI Recommender began to show us where topics are covered in our portfolio in the directory and where we had gaps. And we were able to communicate those gaps to the APs so that they can fill in the missing or emerging topics. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. But we also were able to draw on annual reports, surveys, and work groups to build more complete pictures of opportunities for approved providers. So let's see, this is an article that we sent in our newsletter to APs, telling them about where those gaps were, sharing the data with them, and then ultimately we would hope to hear about how that was implemented in their annual reports back to us, or in their recertification and reaccreditation process. Okay, moving forward, we've got the opportunity as well to use the data for organizational impact and strategic direction. So professional development and even larger directions, resource allocation and program design are all possible. All these things on the list here are possible with the data. And I think that we're beginning, and this is a new project for us. We're beginning to leverage and utilize the data in new and growing ways. It has been instrumental in supporting board level decisions where our pilot data, participation data on an ongoing basis are being fed to them, and learner feedback are just absolutely critical and used to inform decisions about the requirements that would be set, rollout, and adoption. So we're really aligning the needs of our members and the board and other partners and stakeholders in this process. Beyond that, it strengthens coordination within our organization and outside of it through our Marcom department. And we're able to identify areas where targeted messaging, engagement, and resources are needed in a very quick way. In this way, the data is moving beyond individual learning, and it's beginning to and approve providers, and it's beginning to inform strategic planning for our staff goals and deliverables, and the organization's staff and goal deliverables. Okay, next, please. So we also have psychometric data, and it generates valuable insight into the item and assessment level. But we have a no stakes assessment, right? And there are no grades, no passing scores, no score cutting, etc. But engagement is required, and we have a high volume administration. So we can evaluate item quality and alignment continuously and identify item difficulty and discrimination. But it has surfaced issues like confusing wording and some misalignment of questions with practice. But learners are also able to leave feedback for any question as they take this. And that has been a rich supply of information for us as well, data that we can implement to improve our processes, and the volunteer group that composes the My Challenge questions that feeds into that on a regular basis. And okay, but I wanted to say that as expected in a low, no stakes model that's rather unique, the traditional reliability behaves differently. So our focus is on quality and alignment. I would also say that we were early adopters of Fine-Tune Generate by Prometric, which is an AI item writing tool. And this psychometric data is informing us on the adoption of that new new content. Of course, everything is reviewed by humans, but it is helpful in the writing process, and we're watching that and using it, watching this data very carefully. Okay. So this model really has been phenomenal for us, and it's supporting our core mission in healthcare certification and as a board, a healthcare board, to protect the public through competent, up-to-date practitioners who are using best practice and evidence-based medicine or science. Looking ahead, there are clear opportunities to strengthen how this data is used. For example, we can develop more practice-specific pathways for athletic trainers who work in secondary schools or professional sports or in the arts or something like that. And we can help create targeted item banks and curated learning experiences. We can work more directly with our approved providers to co-design content, work much more closely in that loop, workshops and conferences based on identified gaps. And we can also share insights with partners to better align efforts with emerging practice needs. We're just beginning to explore the many opportunities, and I think it's been so enriching listening to the other presenters today talk about how they've really drilled down into depth into various areas, and it's given us a lot of great ideas too. But thank you so much for sharing, for letting us share our example.
Thank you, Heather. That was fantastic. And now I will, again, not least, turn it over to Bill. He's between us and questions. So, Bill?
Oh, thanks.
Talk about the space industry.
Yeah, that speeds me up. Thanks a lot, Pam. No, I can be quick. For the half of you who had trouble getting in and weren't here at the beginning, my name is Bill West, and I'm one of the partners at K West Partners. It's a group that came together, credentialing leaders that came together to do something a little bit different in the industry to help credentialing boards, organizations, associations really enhance their value to the professions they serve, and through providing incremental leadership services, through new types of data analysis and types of credentialing programs. And it's in that capacity that I want to share two examples where we provide basically leadership, incremental capacity, drawing from the Mission Critical Global Alliance and the Space Workforce. I'll end up with the Space Workforce Institute in light of, Artemis and everything going on right now. So briefly, so the Mission Critical Global Alliance is focused on the mission critical space, infrastructure, personnel, and the flagship certification is the Certified Mission Critical Operator. And so these are the personnel, with some experience, entry-level people serving data centers across the country. And to build this, we, with our partner GSX and others who provided the psychometric expertise, did the normal thing, right? The JTAs, looking at the industry, what they need, the subject matter experts. What does it take for somebody who works in really kind of a high pressure, mission critical environment, and came up with all the normal things that this group would expect, kind of all the domains, the weightings, the percentages, where we can absolutely stomp our feet and say, this is the role, it's legally defensible, psychometrically valid for somebody in this space to serve in a data center. If you want to go to the next slide. And hopefully avoid things like this. Unfortunately, actual scenes from the field where, attaching wires to screws and that's a socket wrench that was used to make a connection. And these are the data centers holding up this call right now, right? So anyway, I can't verify if these guys were certified or not, but the kinds of things that you want to avoid. If you want to go to the next slide. So we what the data center field really, it's a multidisciplinary disciplinary operation, right? And it's pretty mission critical. It is basically, zero tolerance, if you can really think of that. And I know medical professions, there's a lot of zero tolerance fields that we serve, but they really needed a way to validate who's coming into the field, who's actually in the field for skilling, reskilling, upskilling, and a way to focus the training. So if you go to the next slide, the part I wanted to share is, and click again. The part I wanted to share is we didn't want to just leave it at the next phase we are moving into is not just leaving it at, okay, this person is qualified at this job role, at this competence level, at, kind of with these years of experience, all the things around that. We wanted to use the data at a much deeper level. So if you look at this, the top is the percentages within, the first domain, kind of anybody who passed, this is the data. Bottom, anybody who failed, this is the data. Some of the things you might expect, if you look, starting with the bottom, what we circled, right? Compare and contrast various power distribution concepts and equipments. Okay, you might expect that, okay, okay, they have a high failure rate in that domain. The test is doing its job. But these are people that could have been practicing for a while, right? It's not just entry-level people coming into the profession. They're certifying, they're trying to uncover information about people who are already in the field. And if you look up top, the people who are past, the 1.3, compare and contrast power distribution concepts and equipment. 30% of those who passed got that wrong. And so our job really is to improve the profession, improve the overall field of data centers, to improve uptime, security, all the things around that. So we're taking this data and feeding it back into the educational systems. We're feeding it back into the employer groups because a lot of the employers are responsible for their own training and data. So it's a little bit of a risk, a transparency risk, if you look at this and say, oh, are they really qualified or not? But we just felt like this is really important data to bring back into the field. That, yep, again, we can stand behind the legal defensibility of that job role. But when we see this kind of data that people are still missing this at this rate as qualified people, it's really concerning because that means power failure. It means the socket wrench, completing the connection, whatever it is. If you go to the next slide, kind of the same thing. Just another example, and click again. Domain 3, same thing, right? Where we see data, these are people, and what I'm not showing you for the interest of time is all the data we're collecting on where are they coming from, what's their educational background, how long they've been in the field, and things like that, and overlaying it with, okay, yeah, they failed, we didn't count them qualified, but they're still in the field practicing, and these are the areas that they're missing. So we're using kind of the rich data that we're collecting through the exam program to feed back into the industry to say, these are the areas we really need to shore up as an industry. So I'll leave it there for mission critical. If you want to keep going. So the other example is from the space industry. So I serve in an incremental capacity as the executive director of the Space Workforce Institute. So the space industry is it's kind of everything, right? It's project management, it's engineers, it's welders, etc. And one of the learning groups, a sister division, had been serving NASA and NATO and all the groups for many years, and saw there really aren't workforce standards. There really aren't credentialing programs that are driving workforce development. And we are falling farther and farther behind in getting talent into the critical, what is now really a critical industry for everything from, what we're doing for research in space, national security, things like that. And so when the industry came to me and said, solve this, and pointed at this chart. So what this is there are something like 10 to 20,000 jobs open in the space industry right now, and we have to add another 250,000 by 2035 to meet the trajectory of where it's going, moving from a $600 billion industry to a $2 to $4 trillion industry. And there's a huge workforce gap. Traditional educational pathways are not keeping up, and there's a lack of people coming into it. So they said, we need workforce standards, we need certifications, go. But what we did is, instead of just jumping into that, we stepped back and said, where is the real problem? Kind of like, Pam and Amy are doing. Where are the real needs for this industry? I don't want to just apply a certification. So we took extensive time looking at the e-learning, looking at the academic programs, things like that to say, where's the most urgent need right now? If you wanted to move to the next slide. And looking at the data, looking at where the employer gaps are, looking at where the job openings are, we saw clearly that we're not going to solve this anytime soon by starting in K-12. We need to grab people from other verticals. Welders, but it's a little bit different welding in Buick than it is from a launch system, right? Project managers, yes, you might be a PMP over here in the pharma industry. You need different moves for the space industry. So the place we started is looking at all those roles as we found that all these employer groups are doing their own training, doing their own gap training. They might even take an aerospace engineer at Lockheed and say, well, we still have to round out the other 20% you didn't learn. So where we started is let's start with creating pathways from any stage of academic or work career. Because a lot of people don't have any idea. Alex from BPS, a pharmacist doesn't realize, or a pharma researcher doesn't realize there's a place for them in the space industry, right? There's a lot of biomedical research going on up in space. Data centers, they're launching data centers into space, right? But you can't just take the same moves you've got here terrestrially and kind of figure out what that means in the space context. So what we did by looking at the data, looking at the job openings, looking at employer needs, on both the public and private sector is came up with, if you go to the next slide, a series of assessment-based certificates, core foundational learning that can be applied. Okay, you're a project manager who's been working in the dental field. Well, you've got 80-90% of the competencies you need. Let's round that out with what you need for the space industry and develop a whole series of learning and certificate programs to meet the gap needs that we are seeing from employers. So if you want to go to the final slide, really the outcomes we're paying attention to are we seeing the ability for journeys from any stage, any academic. We were recently embedded with the Space MBA program at the University of Colorado Springs, right? You might think, okay, what does an MBA need? They still need the space context. So we're tracking kind of we need. When I say advancement for a diverse, fully engaged, resilient, it's diverse in the best, broadest sense of the term. We kind of need everybody to solve this, right? Are we creating a resilient space community? So some of the data we're paying attention to is once they're in, what's the retention rate? What are the pathways in? How long does it take to get someone in? We've got a whole list of credentials we still need to build, but looking at, are we starting to solve some of the workforce shortages? Are we starting to meet some of the employer needs to solve whether they're a risk, whether it's retention, whether are the employees more efficient coming through this pathway to start their career? So I know that was unsatisfyingly brief and quick, but a couple of different ways we're using the data that we're to build the right programs and under the Space Workforce Institute, and some of how we're using the very rich data through the certification program to serve the data center industry a little bit better.
Well, thank you, Bill. We really appreciate that. And we appreciate two different industry perspectives for sure. So thank you. Okay, we're going to move into Q&A. So we have about 10 minutes left. And I know Cynthia has been managing the questions coming in. So do we have any that we want to answer, Cynthia?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of questions from the chat. Pam, I'll start with you. From earlier on in the beginning of your presentation, you talked about moving away from some of the micro-credentialing programs that you had, and then some of the work that we did kind of looking at adding micro-credentials. Can you just talk about kind of why you might have been moving away from some and then adding some and kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So just to give you context, the 4 core credential programs that NAAEI has are really robust role-based credentials. It's almost like we do everything that a certification does, and we add the training. So the training itself could easily be a week to 8 or 9 days long. And so that's where the robustness of those programs have come in. The micro credentials that EI has at this time and have been around for 5, 6, 7 years are only if you earn the initial credential first and then you want to add on. So we've had really plummeting interest in those credentials over the last few years. And so we had to kind of take a look at our resources and say, well, can we even update the content right now? And the answer is no. We've got to focus on these other things. And so we are going to use this process to reinvent micro credentials for us. And so we're excited about that because we've been sharing with our volunteer leaders, like micro credentials doesn't have to look the same, right? Again, as we've been doing for the last 10 years, we need to look at them differently.
Great, thank you. And then for Heather at BOC, there was a question in the chat around some of the questions you were asking certificates to reflect on in that process. Was there any pushback from certificates on completing their goals or reflections, or did you get a sense that people were open to that? Did you receive any feedback from certificates that might have indicated they were having some pushback on that process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Change management was huge. There are people that were ready to step into it and make the changes and work in this new system, and people that are exploring it. And then we have people that are like, I'd rather stay in what I know. So we really haven't had a lot of pushback about the goals or the reflection. They're very short. It doesn't take a lot of time. My challenge questions and the learning path are things that take a little bit more intentionality and effort, and that's where we get a little bit more engagement with our users. But yeah, change management is real.
Yeah. Amy, for you, there was a comment around the number of reports you mentioned in generating in some of those operational reports. And question was if you were using AI in any of the generation of those reports. It seemed a little manual, and could AI be incorporated into that process to hopefully ease up some of your time in creating some of those reports?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the reports have not been built with AI, and we don't use AI to fix anything. We did work with a consultant to build those reports for us. And let me be the first to say that I'm not an expert in AI, so it's possible that we can work on using AI to decrease the manual nature of things. These reports are, really tracking very specific and detailed processes in the system, which then flag for us the need to go in and look at a specific item, say the CECs that someone submitted, and to determine whether they fell into the right date range and why did their application not update. That's just one example. But so, and then we do manual fixes of those. It's quite possible that AI could help us with that, and I appreciate the suggestion. I just need to wrap my head around how that would work. But it's, sometimes it's onerous, sometimes it's just refreshing because we run the reports and there's nothing that needs to be fixed. It's not like 40 reports are giving us, dozens of hours of work to do. Most of them say everything clean, everything clean. It's just, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to know that you're not spending all of your days. There's another question from Jeffrey around the financial data and how you're communicating success to your board around some of these initiatives. I know for us, we're doing feasibility studies, some of those that are older and have come to fruition. The financial data is in kind of the volume or recertification rates, but it takes a long time for that data to start coming in and you start seeing that volume after you've developed a program. So Pam, I know you're in the middle of development or still looking into some of the development. So for Heather or Pam or Bill, any feedback on kind of where your financial data is and what metrics you're using to communicate success to the board on some of these projects?
Yeah, I can go first. So from a strategic standpoint with EI, definitely the board receives monthly financial statements, right, that are always tracking the overall organization's financial health, as well as ability to view into the reserves, understand the reserve ratio, like all of that's coupled into our normal kind of financial conversations with the board. I think what this process has done and really highlighted is that we've introduced cash flow statements that are 3 to 5 years out, and our forecasting has become more sophisticated. So that way we can say, hey, here's where we're at today, but we're trying to get to this place over here. And so that's where Bill's team is going to be working with us on the market analysis to help build out the ROI, return on investment. Like if we want to invest in, you know, breaking up our credentials into micro credentials to lead up to the big credential, right? Our current programs, or develop these new programs, whether it's the skills-based professional development or the micro credentials in a different light. We need to show the data how financially EI will move from a traditional break-even standpoint to a cash flow positive on a consistent basis through a cash flow analysis.
Mm-hmm. Heather, anything for your project?
Well, I can say that the pilot that we conducted did inform the board as they made the decision to fund the project moving forward. We're in our nascency. We've launched, we have 2 months under us, and it was an encumbrance that the board took based on the engagement and the learner and the outcomes that we demonstrated in the pilot. I think moving forward, I would think that the board is going to be looking at for an ROI the engagement with membership and how that impacts members long term. If it helps with keeping them engaged with the organization and so on and so forth, and how it supports our core mission as well. So it's going to be
Yeah, I think
evolving.
Yeah, I think you're bringing in a really good point around the mission purpose of it as well, in terms of, I mean, there's an expectation around that customization, Heather, that your product is bringing around, okay, well, these are my goals, and so here's what I need to work on, and it's allowing them to really customize their ongoing experience with you. And that is something that I think we just expect in our day-to-day. And so that kind of engagement with BOC as an organization is probably meeting a different type of expectation that they have with you.
Say, Cynthia, just to add to that, if you don't mind, I'll just.
Sure.
So for the break even, the ROI, I mean, we follow a kind of a feasibility framework that's a combination of standards needed, looking at the pipeline, looking at the validating environment, right? Is the credential needed? Will it be recognized? And for analyzing the market for what we build, but then there's a feedback loop to the board, to the cornerstone partners of, is it solving the need? Is it self-sustaining? But it's kind of a complicated, like self-sustaining can be a little tricky as far as, is it still valued? Because we also go into workforce development board funding, economic funding, where it's not necessarily sustained by candidates who are signing up for it, but workforce boards that need to invest in the pipeline. So it's a little bit, I'm not going to do this justice right now, but it's a little bit tricky on how you analyze is it self-sustaining versus kind of what return it's getting. But it's kind of a mix of what's the value it's bringing to the market, plus, you know, what revenue to our organization.
Right. I'm seeing 1 minute left. So is there any other final questions? Samantha, you had a question for Pam. Pam, how long have your programs been in place? For frame of reference, for 3 to 5 year projections, how long have your core programs been in place, for example?
So the core programs have been around for over 35 years. And so that's where there's, you know, that history of having kind of serve the industry in a very specific way, and that's how EI has been viewed. And so part of what we also work through with our messaging is that EI is different. EI is new, kind of a new perspective on how we want to train and be a part of the industry's growth and professional development. Not just the same way we have been.
All right. Well, I think we're slowing down in the comments as we're coming to the 1:30 Eastern time. So Pam, I'll kick it back over to you for any closing comments.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and dedication today. We did use AI for some of our slides. So there's a disclosure there. But just wanted to give you our email addresses. Feel free to reach out. It's been a pleasure to share this with you today, and we look forward to seeing you at future CNG events.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, to the audience, please watch your emails for future events. And thank you very much for giving us your time. Have a good day, everyone.